Okay, we're live.
Happy New Year.
All right. We're live? We're all set?
Yeah, we're live.
Awesome. I think we're actually
lady,
live. I think
good
we
to
were
see
live
you guys
for
again.
Part of the countdown. I think we're actually live. But what's going on, everybody?
Could they see us during that? I was just probably staring off into space.
I have no idea.
I was worried my thing had froze. If I was sitting just like...
Cameron was posing.
One of his glamour shots.
There you go.
Vogue.
So what's going on, everybody? So we got the Q&A today. This is normally one of the most popular just because it kind of gets off the rails pretty quick.
Oh, yes.
Especially with Hunter here. It's going to be good.
I'm waking up.
But yeah, if everyone wants to jump on, just kind of introduce yourself. I mean, everyone probably knows who you are already, but Cameron, go.
Okay. Hi, Cameron McCall, author, co-author of the Quinn books, also known as the Phantom Queen Diaries. Solo book, Cinders and Salt, the Ventlight, I forget what even we call those, Ventlight Chronicles, Ventlight Archives. There you go. And aspiring good human. Go ahead and move on to the next person, please.
All right,
You get
Kimbra.
struck by lightning, everybody kind of duck.
Go ahead, Kimbra.
Hi, I'm Kimbra Swain. I am the author of the Alchemist Air series with Argento plus others of my own, and I have purple hair.
Boom. so name some of your other books, some of your other series.
The biggest is Fairy Tales of Trailer Park Queen, which is takes place in Alabama with a fairy queen that lives in a trailer park. I have the Oddities Emporium, which is about a guy that owns an oddity shop, and he has a treasure trove of magical items. And I have Legend of the Vampire Reject, is about a vampire who hates being a vampire. So,
And he's named Soren, right?
His name is Malik.
I thought you actually went with Soren. Okay.
No.
Okay. Because I know we were talking about that when you were first writing it.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. All right, Hunter, go. Beard Man.
Hey guys, Hunter Blain, author of the, am I saying this right? Preter Natural Chronicles?
I don't know how to say it.
Brett.
I have no idea how to say it either. I've sat there plenty of times where how do you pronounce this?
Yeah, Preter Natural Chronicles. What's funny is I had Batman, Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, do a cameo for me, and he called it the Preter Natural, but I was like, well, that's that.
Yeah.
If Batman says it, it's the law.
That's true. That's true. And my name's Prettier Than Cameron Silvers. I write the Nate Temple series. Let's see what else I write. Shaded Devil, Feathers and Fire, working on a couple other stuff on the side, but I also started Argento Publishing, and the whole goal with that was tax evasion. So, no, the whole goal with that was to help other authors hopefully do what I was able to do, and help just try to take over the marketing and see if I can get, take the place of traditional publishing, see if I can help people who want to be an author get noticed. So that was kind of the goal, and to make Argento fun too, with kind of edgy urban fantasy and break the tropes. The only way to fix urban fantasy is basically to destroy it. It's kind of my mentality. So that's pretty much it. And we got Robert. Why don't you go ahead, man? You're the boss today.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that everybody's got the introductions out of the way, we can get started. Now, like I was telling everybody else, the questions this year are a lot more diverse. They are for everybody. We have a few personalized ones, but those will be for later. So if y'all are ready, we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Question number 1. What was one of the most surprising things you learned in writing your first book?
Pick your target.
That's for everybody. Everybody can, whoever wants to start can go for it.
I'll go. There's a lot, like a ridiculous amount, but I've always been the type that to test the temperature of the water, I'll just do a cannonball in the deep end. So I figured it out as I went. A lot of YouTube videos, but I tell people the hardest part about writing a book is to write a book. And then once you actually get past all the excuses of why you can't write and whatnot, and you actually write your first book, the easiest part of becoming a writer is writing your first book. There's so much after it that I had no idea that you had to do. Like editing for example, you cannot self-edit. You know, I mean, maybe some people can, but I for sure cannot. You know, all the stuff on the back end, getting the covers designed, the proper formatting, and the marketing. Oh God, I'm so thankful for Lane, because I hated the marketing stuff. It was soul draining. But there's just so much more business to writing than what a lot of people realize. I didn't even realize, and I've always been an entrepreneur my whole life. So yeah, it was crazy to learn, but got it.
Yeah, nailed it.
All right, Kimbra.
I think the biggest surprise for me was when I wrote. I actually wrote just one chapter when I decided I was going to do this, and I gave it to a friend of mine, which was Tabitha. Many of you know Tabitha, and she read it and she said, "I don't read this kind of stuff," and I was like, "Oh crap!" And then she said, "But I love this. I want to read all of it," and it just astonished me that anybody would want to read it. And then so I decided to, go ahead and write the book. And my first book, which is in the Path Redemption series, which I need to get back to, ended up being over 160,000 words.
Whoa, your first book?
Yeah, and wow. I had
wow,
had no idea that I could put that many words down. It was about a month and a half it took me to write it, and it started an addiction, really, of writing, because I was working full time and trying to write at night when I got home from work and after my daughter went to bed and everything, and I would stay up to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and then turn around and go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time not sleeping, and I guess that's another surprising thing, how little sleep that I can live on.
Yeah. I can kind of echo the sentiments.
All right, Cameron?
Okay. Fine.
I had a little bit of a lag issue.
Prettier, but not more interesting. So it's funny. So my first book, obviously, I wrote with Shayne, and so I'm actually not going to talk about that one because, in a lot of ways, I think it was like a completely different experience than anything anyone else would be dealing with, because I kind of just walked into something that was already built and kind of just built a side piece to it. But with the book that I just published, which would be my first standalone. I'd say that the surprising thing I learned, because at that point I'd already written 11 other ones, was like how difficult writing that first book was. I had really no gauge whatsoever for how difficult it would be to build a substantial world that was fully realized, and because again, I inherited everything Shayne had already done. So much easier being like, all right, I'm just gonna riff off a lot of the concepts that he had. I moved it to a different city and changed a lot of things along those lines, but I still has characters and, I was playing around with different things, and I kept pretty much to the tone that he'd already set. But doing something brand new, you kind of have to develop your own voice and figure out exactly what kind of story you want to tell and how you want to tell it. And that was a real eye-opening experience.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I would say mine would be, I can kind of echo everyone, obviously, but mine was the time involved. I thought it would be a lot easier. And the first book I wrote was probably, I think, 240,000 words. And it was like typical sword and sorcery fantasy, like old school. It's still sitting on my computer, but to build a world, like Cameron said, was so complicated, especially one that was like not something I could riff off the real world, since it was old school fantasy with horses and no electricity and all that stuff. It just made it really difficult, and so that was hard. But the marketing was what changed everything. But and that's a whole different discussion. But the marketing itself is way more than anyone realizes when they pull up their Word document and start typing. But when it comes to the actual story itself, the writing, I would say my biggest, not necessarily that it was bad, it was just more difficult than I thought, was building characters that were complex. Because it's so easy to say, I've got a werewolf, I've got a vampire, I've got a wizard, I've got this. But to give them something that makes them entirely unique and flawed and good and bad at the same time, and really just to psychologically mess with the readers, rather than just kind of phoning it in and saying, okay, it's a werewolf, or okay, it's a wizard, they've got fireballs, to really kind of make it more fun than that and more complicated and more relatable. And so that was the most fun part, but is also the hardest part.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that from my own experiences.
Yeah.
I can agree with everything that y'all just said.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much nothing what y'all just said is nice. Something everything y'all said is something I've experienced. So trust me, I can understand where y'all are coming from on that one. All right. Let's see. Let's skip around a little bit. Let's see. What big thing did you edit out of a book and why? Kimbra, we'll start with you this time.
Ooh, I guess the biggest thing, and spoiler alert, I'm going to kind of talk about something that's, spoiler related. There's a major character that I kill off in book 8 of Fairy Tale of the Triplet Queen, and I actually wrote it into book 5, and I couldn't live with it. And so I kicked it out, and I kicked it down the road, and it took me, 3 more books to actually drum up the courage to actually do it. It had been the plan from the beginning to kill off the character. But, when it came time for me to do it, I couldn't. And so I edited it out of book 5, and it ended up in book 8.
You just had the knife right there. You just couldn't bring yourself to make that final plunge.
I couldn't do it. And even when I did it, it was just soul wrenching, and so,
Delightful, is that what you said?
Yes. Exactly what you said.
All right, Cameron, we'll go with you for your answer for that one.
So give me the question one more time.
It says, what big thing did you edit out of a book and why?
Man, I don't know that I have, to be honest. Like I'll go in. So I write a little differently than probably everybody here. Maybe, I don't know. But I write chronologically, and I don't skip around. So like, I tend to like linear story start to finish, which like often means that I might have to like peel away a chapter every so often and be like, all right, is this the best way to go about telling this exact thing? But it also means that I usually know where I'm going enough to not go back and have to like remove anything too major. So I'm afraid I can't really give you an example, unfortunately.
All right. Shayne, you want to take the next part?
Yeah, so mine's always pretty much tied to how dark I want to go, or how kind of evil I want my jokes to be. And so whenever I'm going through the first drafts, I really roast some of the pantheons and characters, and I have some like Hunter level jokes. And then I kind of dial it back. I try anyway. No one can be as cruel as Hunter, but I try. And some of the times I send it to, my select few, or Cameron, I'll text it to him, and he's like, "Oh, that's funny, but don't do that."
Oh, no, yeah. That happened with this last one, 100%.
Yeah, there was a couple where Cameron.
And then you put it in anyway, so I don't.
Yeah, there's a
couple.
Tell you. There's a couple that I still put in, but I would send it to my editor, Lane, and Lane just dies laughing. He's like, "Please, God, don't put that in there. That's hilarious, but don't do that." And so mine's just kind of, it's not necessarily self-editing because I still find a way to put the joke in. It's just when I go first draft, it's raw. I mean, it's all in. And so then I kind of dial it back and say, okay, how would Nate really say this? Or what would be a funnier way to tell this joke? Or this, jab or whatever it is. So mine's just kind of reading the room and finding out how far I can push them and how far I can push the line to get the joke across without just making them shut down. Because then you ruin the whole point of the joke in the first place if you just get them to shut down. So,
very true, very true.
Baby steps.
I do not envy Lane being the one who has to try to keep you under control. All right, Hunter.
Yeah, so I've only had to do it once. I'll send some to my editor, and she's phenomenal at the stuff that she catches. She catches a lot of continuity stuff. Like, hey, her shirt was pink in the last chapter. I'm like, oh, duh, easy stuff like that. But for the first time ever, we actually had to do an edit on a book 7. And I talked to Shayne and Lane about this because someone was complaining about it in a group. And normally, I write for me and I don't care what anyone else thinks at all. You're welcome to join me, but I write what I want, and that helps keep it, true. And I'm not trying to please anyone, so it's more authentic and whatnot. But there was a part in book 7 where I reference 2020, and I was I didn't mean to make it political or anything like that. It was more like a character was catching someone else up because they made a joke about hindsight being 2020, and then they were like, "Well, actually, that doesn't mean what you think it means anymore. It actually means that things could be a lot worse." And then he kind of explained some stuff, and then someone mentioned it in a group, and then I went back and reread it. I was like, "Huh." And then I let Shayne and Lane read it, and they're like, "Yeah, we get where both sides are coming from, but I wasn't going to change it just because if someone was like, I didn't like what you wrote." It was more the fact that whenever I watch TV, shows or movies, I hate it. I hate it whenever they remind me about how much the real world sucks. And I did that in book 7. I took people out of the fantasy world that I created, their escapism, and I brought them back and reminded them, like, hey, you're living through hell right now, kind of thing. Even though 2020 was good for me, but so we actually went back and I slightly altered it, and I actually made it where it flowed better and it worked better for the story overall. But yeah, that was the only time I've ever actually had to change something, was because I failed to keep the reader in the fantasy world and just reminded them that life is still out there, whether you like it or not. And what's fun is the book 7s that I have left. I have like 10 left, I think. Those have the original one. So go to the Argento bookstore and get your limited edition book 7.
They're $10,000 each.
Product placement.
Special edition.
Yeah. So that's a difficult one. I always hate that because I never want to censor myself or censor anyone. But in that situation that Hunter mentioned, it wasn't a joke or anything. It just sucked. Like, it was just like, people should be able to read that and move on. But the whole point of a book is to get them out of the real world. And that's why we're like, man, I can see both sides. And the whole point is to entertain. That's, remind them, show them a mirror that, hey, that sucked, didn't it? And so that was kind of our decision, was like, yeah, maybe, if it was just a censorship on a viewpoint, that'd be different. But it was more just like, I think it would be a better result for the reader if we did this. So that sucks. Anytime
it's definitely a mistake I will never make again. And I want to keep people as deep in my fantasy world as possible to help you guys escape the real world. And like I said, whenever I'm watching a show or something and they put in an obviously either like a political statement or overtone, really, I'm just like, oh my God, no, what have you done? I was having fun. Now I remember that there's outside world is out my window and it sucks.
Yeah, bad. It's still out there.
Yep. Good question.
All right. Okay, here's one's gonna be kind of fun for everybody. Would you and your main character get along? Shayne, we already know you're your main character already, so we know you two get along already.
we would definitely get along. I would say with Nate, absolutely. With Callie, I would get along with all of them, or else I wouldn't write them if I despised them. But all for different reasons. Like Quinn, I could go drinking with, and then not call the next day because I don't want to be reminded of what crimes we got into the night before.
Don't I know there's a warrant out there for your arrest?
Yeah, exactly. Like, just pretend it didn't happen. But Callie she'd be stressful to hang out with because you just never know what she's thinking. And Soren,
you should know.
Yeah, exactly.
It came out of your head, dude.
You don't, but you should.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's me saying that. So you're right. But with Soren, he's interesting because I tried to write someone that's just so out of touch with everything we know and accept. So I think he would be really fun to hang out with. But yeah, I think I would get along with all of them, just for different reasons.
All right, Hunter, we'll go with you for the next part.
Well, I think everyone at this point knows that I wrote the series for my dead best friend, John. So we got along pretty good, growing up together and stuff. So I would say yes. I would get along with my main character very, very well.
All right, Cameron.
Yeah, so I guess I've got two at the moment that you guys know about. There's Quinn for sure. Her development's been great. She's like a character who's kind of reflective of who I am as a person, but like with, obviously some other elements drawn in. So I'd either love her or I'd hate her. I don't really know which. It would probably, if alcohol was involved, we'd probably be fine. Otherwise, I honestly don't know. She'd probably beat me up because I'm way too much of a wuss for her. But Valentine, probably not at all, to be honest. Not because I dislike the guy or whatever, but like he's a moody son of a bitch. So that would be like, you know what I mean? Like you got that one friend who's like always a fucking downer. Like that would be competent, and whatever. But like I wrote him as this pretty traumatized human. And those don't tend to be my friends. So probably not, but I would, kind of same situation. Love to catch a drink.
I mean, you based them off Lane, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I took the most sarcastic, kind of crabby human you could think of, and then I just used that as the base model.
He's listening to this.
I know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, Kimbra, what about you?
I think with Galen, who is in Flask of the Master, I think I get along with Galen, but I think I'd be one of those people that just want to grab him by the lapel and say, "Good God, get your shit together," because that's the way I feel writing him, especially through the whole first book. The second book, he and I got along a lot better, but the first book, I wanted to,
Smack him silly.
Yeah. As for like Grace, I think Grace and I have a lot of similar personality character types. And so writing her is like writing myself, not to the extent that Nate is Shayne, but I think there's a lot of I wish I could be more like her kind of thing. So it makes it easier for me to write her because that's, the kind of person that I wish I was a little more brutal like she is. I can't do that personally, especially in this life. And then like right now I'm working on the last book of my Phoenix series, and I like Winnie, but Winnie takes over when I write. And so she and I don't get along because of all the storylines I have. She rewrites everything that I intend to do. And so yeah, she and I don't get along on that level. I love her to death, but she's like the stepsister that you tolerate. So.
Okay. Yeah, I can see all that. I can understand that completely. Let's see. Okay, here we go. When you're writing an emotionally draining or sexy or sad, etc. scene,
those are all.
How do you get in the mood?
Things.
I know, they have it in parentheses.
Not for me.
Any of them, really. I'm just reading them as they come up, man. I'm
sorry. I shouldn't have interrupted.
It's okay. But emotionally draining scenes, romantic scenes, anything like that. How do y'all get in the mood for that?
Shayne, how do you get in the mood for the romantic scenes?
I don't know if you guys noticed this, but there's not a whole lot of romantic scenes in my books. There's a couple. I don't know. I normally think, I turn on some Marvin Gaye, maybe call Hunter.
At the same time.
Same time, of course. Get a hot tea, just put a robe on and say, what would Hunter do? But I normally, when I start any kind of emotional scene, I really think about the setting. And so there's a scene where a certain character dies in Legend. So not romantic, but there's a scene where a character dies in Legend, and I could see it before I wrote it. I could see the sky. I could see what the clouds were doing. I could see the way the grass was like swaying in the wind, and I could see the place that Nate was going to fight this person. And I could see the cliff, and I could see the ocean in the background. Like I could see it, and I could taste the air. And so I really kind of put myself into the scene, the setting itself. And then I really amp up the emotion. So like if Nate's angry, I make him really angry. And I say, okay, why is he so angry? How can I make him angrier? And so I really amp up everything. I just throw gas on the fire, and then see what happens. And so that's kind of how I approach everything. So when it comes to action, it'll be that. When it comes to romance, I'll really set the scene too, with kind of making sure that the setting touches the senses. So I talk about how the air tastes, what he smells, what something feels like when they touch a blanket, and like the tactile feedback. Like I try to put the reader in that scene so that even if I kind of drop the ball, they feel like they're right there, and they can relate and they can follow along. So I kind of, that's how I approach it.
All right, Kimbra.
I don't know that I really prepare to do them. I think that I feed a lot on my own emotions. And so because I don't really plan my stories out, the emotions that I end up writing end up being what I'm feeling a lot of times. And there are times when I have to write something that, is romantic, or have to write something that's sad. And then, I just do, it's like, you got to do it, so let's do it, kind of thing. But a lot of times I feed on my own emotions. And so I think that helps make what I'm doing with my characters more real.
Okay, that makes sense. Cameron?
Yeah, I don't prepare for it in any way either. I'm very similar to both Kimbra and Shayne in the respect that like Shayne does the tactile thing. That's in my writing style anyway. I do a lot of like sensory kind of elements when I'm working on stuff. I don't channel it that often. I tend to write not subdued people per se, but like I tend to focus more on people who have like kind of mellow emotional states, but like with a lot under the surface. Like Nate gets really angry. Quinn in the earlier books kind of does that, but like as you move along, she gets angry, but she doesn't act on that in the same way. There's only been a few times that I felt like I've really like channeled the Zen moments of like I'm feeling what the reader's probably going to feel. And the classic example I can think of is in Dark and Stormy, which is book 4 of Quinn's stuff. There's a scene, and I don't know if we need a spoiler warning for a book that was written a while back, but I'll say it, where her aunt dies. And in that scene, I was writing it like tearing up on my own, right? Like, which is a weird, never happened with anything else. I mean, I try to make it so that the audience does that, right? Like there are other times when I'm sure people are emotionally distraught. I personally, as the author, have not really been emotionally distraught, but that one time is like the one in my memory where I was like the most kind of like, I guess, channeling how I would feel if somebody like emotionally eviscerated me. That's what I was going for, and I managed to pull it off well enough that I did it to myself. So I counted that as a win, and I try to channel more of that, and that's something that Shayne does really well that like I've kind of stolen from him, is that that internal monologue, stripping away the unnecessary stuff and focusing a lot on what like drives character, what drives people to do the things that they do.
All right.
All
right, Hunter, what about you?
What was the question again?
When you're writing a sad, emotional, any kind of scene that has any kind of real emotions to it, how do you get in the mood for that scenario?
I don't know.
Romance, sadness, stuff like that.
I can just do it. It's weird. Anger's really easy for me. Like I don't even have to try on that one. Pride, that one's pretty easy. I've learned to get over that over my life. Music helps. I have a writing list on YouTube, all instrumental. Some of it will be dark and morose, and some, one of them I listen to usually whenever I'm doing the second read through is there's a lo-fi Star Wars thing. So just hearing the chill Star Wars beats, like it's nothing crazy. It's just, if you've ever listened to lo-fi on YouTube, it's really just ambient noise in the background. So,
I think I have.
But for emotional stuff, I don't know. It's just, I can just do it. I suppose it's pretty easy to get in the characters' headspaces, mostly because my characters are based on real people. So I could just ask myself, I think I know how they'd react in this situation. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy.
All right.
So it's not just John. You've got multiple characters that are all based on real people.
Yeah, almost all of them, really.
Say.
John, Depwig, Valenta, Joey, Dawson. I'm scared. Haley, Ludwig. Locke is loosely based on my buddy Kirby. Yeah, like most of the character. The only one who's real is made up is Ulrich, because people have asked me before. Is Ulrich based on someone? I said, I freaking hope not. That guy's a dick.
An old boss.
There you go. I've done that. I've done that. Detective Kostegi.
Yeah.
All right, next one says, do you find it more challenging to write the first book in a series or to write the continuing novels? Kimbra, we'll start with you.
First book.
First book?
Absolutely. Especially with Alchemist Air, because I was trying to do something a little different, but still stay within what I was known for doing, and keep it familiar to my writing. But I wanted to try to push myself to do something a little different and try to reach more of Shayne's audience, because it was being done through Argento. And it was a struggle to put myself in that box, which I'm fine moving around in that box now. I've got plenty of room. But it was very difficult because you're establishing characters and you're establishing a world and you're establishing a magic, whatever you call it, the magic system. And you have all these things going on, and you have to avoid just the info dump of this is what this is and this is what this is. You have to, really kind of work it into the story so that people learn as they go through the story. But then again, you have to, give them enough in the beginning for them to be interested in what that world is. And so the first book is always very, very difficult, making sure I hit all of those notes so that when you get to the end of it, you want to read the rest of them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Cameron?
First book. Absolutely the first book. There's nothing like it. I mean, everything after that is I won't say a cakewalk, but my God, it's just so much simpler because you're really just, making the best of what you've already created. And there's a reason why I think, all these major series and trilogies and whatever else that we see in film and television work the way they do, and people can argue with me if they want to, but like Star Wars is a good example, right? Like A New Hope is a great start, but like for most people, it's not the best one, right? Like you spend a lot of time building up this world that people are super intrigued by, and then you capitalize on it in book 2, book 3, and then so on, and with varying degrees of success. But the idea there is that like once you've kind of laid the foundation, you can do a lot to improve the product even. So like, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, doing Quinn now, when I want to jump into a Quinn, it's like eating a comfort food. I mean, it's nothing. It's just going back to something that I always enjoyed. That it's different when I'm 4 books in to like a long run. That sometimes will make it like, all right, it would be a good time to stop or slow down for a little while. Just so that way, like the character's voice doesn't just basically stay the same through all of those. But otherwise, I'd say definitely the first book.
All right. And Shayne?
That's a tough question because I can answer it both. The first one, to me, the story's going to be really hard if I try to focus on the story versus the character. So I can have a cool concept for a story, but if I don't have a really clear concept of the character, it's going to be fucking impossible. But if I do have that, you can normally fly through a lot of this stuff because you're walking in the character's shoes and you're saying, okay, what would they see? So that makes it a lot easier, which is why I focus on characters so much. But also at the end, when you're trying to wrap everything together. So in the beginning, you're scared that you won't start it well. In the end, you're scared that you're going to screw up everything good you did before. And so to make sure that you're really closing loopholes or not loopholes, but open-ended questions and open-ended arcs. And that might just be because I'm working on a big universe. And so it's getting much harder to write the later books. Cameron and I talk about that all the time, where it's like we've got 3 different series that we got to kind of marry together. If it was just Nate or just Callie or just Quinn, I think it'd be a lot easier. But trying to not just have them stand alone, but also come together, that's really difficult. So I don't know. I can see it both ways. But I think if you have the characters developed clearly in your mind, it makes everything so much easier.
Okay, that makes sense. Hunter, what about you?
Both for different reasons. Shayne kind of nailed it with the setting up the characters and so forth. But writing your first book in the series is every bit as difficult as you can imagine. But at the same time, I learned the hard way that if you say one sentence casually in one book, it's canon. So it becomes continuity. So you have to be mindful. Like my series is going to be 13 books, and I have to remember basically every sentence I wrote, because you can't have any contrasting messages or whatever it is in those books. So you have to just remember. I've written, I don't even know, 600,000-700,000 words at this point in my books. So I have to remember every single sentence in those, and but it does become easier once you get the flow. I know where the story is going. I know how to get there. So I mean, both are difficult for their own reasons, but both are also really fun.
All right, yeah, I can understand that. All right, how do you balance making a reader think, challenge them, or give them what they want?
Shayne, I want to hear this from you.
So hold on, say it again, just so I don't answer the wrong question here.
Okay, how do you balance making a reader think, challenge them, and give them what they want?
The last one. That's what I want to know.
So I don't know. That question can be taken many different ways. So I always try to push the reader, but I don't ever want to preach. And I made a bunch of posts on this in the Den of Freaks and just on my page. Like, I don't want an author, if I'm a reader, I don't want an author to tell me what to think. I want them to say, here's some different ways you could think, or here's how to think. And have you ever considered this approach or this opinion or whatever? Not in a nonfiction sense where we're talking ideologies and stuff, but just from a character perspective. I love seeing bad guys that have noble causes, and they're just going about it the wrong way. And I love seeing good guys that are making epic mistakes or epic, moral failures in their process to do the right thing. So basically, the bad guy and the good guy are the same, just different reflections. And so when it comes to the reader, I'm always trying to push them a little bit further without telling them, hey, I'm right, you're wrong. I want them to say, hey, here's two sides of the story, and they're both kind of right, aren't they? Oh, wait, they're both kind of wrong, aren't they? And so I really just like seesaw back and forth and really psychologically manipulate the reader to just knock them off their footing, no matter which side of the fence they're on. So that hopefully when they sit back in the end, they're just like, man, I don't know what the fuck I just read. And they're like, I don't know what I believe anymore. And then they start going off on their own journey of research or whatever and saying, that made me think a little bit. And I think that's the coolest thing, is not preaching, not soapboxing, but just entertaining them so they don't even know what's happening. But then afterwards, when they're digesting it, they're like, man, that got me. That's a really cool question, or, whatever it was. And so I never want to do a cookie cutter thing where I avoid all that, but I want to kind of stealth it in and then show both sides so that people have to think about something in a different way. That's always kind of my goal. If that answers the question, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it answers the question. Kimbra, how would you answer that one?
Repeat it for me so I can remember.
How do you balance making a reader think, challenge them, and give them what they want?
I think part of that is molding them to realizing what they want is what you want. I know there are times when I've written something and the direct comment has been, I didn't expect you to do that. which means to me that they had something completely different in their mind, and I decided to do something different. And I do, especially in my spoiler room, I pay a lot of attention to the comments and stuff that are made in there, because that's when they really start showing their emotions about what I write. And then when I get to the next book, I try to switch it up or change it so that they don't expect what they see coming. And then sometimes I just, they got it right and I let them have it right, kind of thing. But I think it's a mix of just, doing new things and then, listening to your readers and giving them what they want, but they didn't realize they want.
Okay, I can understand that one. Hunter, how about you? How would you answer that question?
First, I'm trying to get this logo center. It's kind of bugging me.
Product placement.
Plus, Shayne says I have to wear it, so. I don't think about the reader, and I don't mean that in any negative light. I love all my readers and whatnot. You guys are awesome, but I don't try to, oh, this is gonna surprise them, or oh, I can't wait. That I get a lot of people do. It's just not my style. I write what I want, and I was actually just thinking about that question, and what it reminds me of is whenever I was a kid, I would play with my action figures. I'd have Supermans and GI Joes and Batman, of course, and Predator and all these things, and I would make up these different storylines and try to be as shocking as possible, or the Terminator, Superman's dad, what? Just it was fun to me. Every day would be something different. So it's funny, you asked that question, and then I never realized that I was kind of like continuing my own internal theater show, if you will. So I do love it, though. Like whenever I write a scene, I write it for me, but I do, after I finish it, I go, oh man, they're going to love this. For example, for the new book, Crack the Sky, which comes out August 23rd, pre-order now. I told my editor and my two alpha readers that the last two words of the entire book, the last two words are some of my favorite. Like, I think it's going to end, people are going to love it in different way for different reasons. Like it's going to bring up some emotion. But, I wrote it because I thought it'd be perfect. But then after I wrote it, I was like, oh, they're going to love this. So, I do afterthought think about the readers and stuff. But, it's they're obviously my fans because they have the same twisted sense of humor and reading style that I do. So, it just works out that we like the same thing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Lane had a funny comment. Lane, I got to share this. Lane had a funny comment on Hunter's thing. He said the last two words are so impacting, and he said, the end.
The end.
Ooh,
That's funny. That's funny.
that is funny. That's very funny. Cameron, you're next.
Yeah, so kind of a mix. I'm actually more in Hunter's camp than most. I think I don't really think about it. The trick to it that I've found for making it successful without having to cater, and obviously I'm not saying that they do, but I'm saying there are people who do very much cater to market, cater to what they expect people to hear or read or what have you, is to stay true to character. So if you build a really cool character, like a complex character, especially if you're doing first person, which is the majority of our books, it's I think quite easy to write things that they find shocking or challenging or what have you, because people are often like that, right? Like you often encounter people who challenge your worldview, so your main character will similarly encounter other people. So if you're making cool side characters with interesting perspectives, you're basically like presenting the world just through a specific lens. So it's not difficult to do, and so I don't really struggle with it. And as far as like giving them what they want, all people want with a book is to be entertained. So like there's different levels of that. I think the most successful versions of it are the ones where they feel like the main character is for whatever reason being taken advantage of or victimized in some way, often in like minor ways, but like those examples are out there for series where people they'll devour the books, often because they're so fixated on seeing what the character is going to do next. And I think that's the strength, right? You just, as long as you build a really cool character to focus on, and then you don't mail it in with your side characters. Don't create a stock somebody who's, just their only goal in that scene is to facilitate a conversation you want your character to have. I think that you're actually pretty safe to be able to challenge readers, but without really having to work too hard at it.
Side quest. What did you mean when you were saying you want to hear how I answer? Because I think you were taking.
I was making a joke because the last part of that was how do you give them what they want, and I'm pretty sure your whole goal is not to give them what they want.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant.
That was my joke. I just want to hear Shayne defend himself. That's it.
Yeah, I didn't want to take that the wrong way. I was like, maybe I'm hearing the question wrong.
Nah.
I don't try to. I try to give the reader what they don't expect.
Yeah.
And if I know I'm going to have a big scene, I'll try to mislead them so that it hits them harder. Yeah, so it hits them harder. But I like messing with the readers.
Personally, I just like it when they cuss me out. When I get those messages, you asshole, I'm like, yes, did my job.
Yep, means I did it right. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see, where's the next one at? How do you select the names for your characters? Hunter, we'll start with you on this one.
They're real people, except for Ulrich. So that was the most difficult one because I knew he was going to be the Joker to John's Batman. So I spent a lot of time on that one. The first time I wrote the book, or when I was like halfway through, it was actually Marius. Then I was like, wait a sec, I know that name. And then I went back and I was like, oh shit, it's from Anne Rice's books. Marius was the one who made Lestat, if I remember right. Yeah, it was. So I was like, well, can't use that one. So I went back and I knew when Ulrich was from the time frame and whereabouts he was from. So then I looked up names. I just typed in, names from, what was it, like 1200 to 1500 or something like that, common names. And then whenever I saw Ulrich, it was just like, guess what? I was like, oh, okay, well, that's clearly it. But what's funny is I had a nutrition store recently for several years. And then as I would write when I was up there, but whenever I was coming home one day, I looked up and I noticed that there's a building, like a company named Ulrich, but with a CH at the end. And I was like, So I can't help if maybe I was pre-programmed on that one.
Possible.
All right, Cameron, how about you?
Characters' names, I'll often do a lot of like what Hunter did, where like if it's time specific or something, I'll go look it up and I'll play around with that. I had to do that a lot for Cinders and Salt. I was going like a lot with Cinders and Salt. The Quinn book's really not difficult at all. Quinn's name was actually kind of funny because I originally wrote a book called, I actually don't even remember the name, but I do remember the name. It was called Carson Quinn and the Sword That Calls, and I wrote it like 7 years before Shayne and I ever like sat down and talked. And I remember that I really liked the name Quinn in it, and then when I decided I want to do a female character, I was like, well, I could use that name. And in the book that I wrote 7 years before, the person was a black magic arms dealer. So it was like a kind of an homage to this thing that I had done before, not particularly well, but I had done it. So like that's how I got that name. And then the stuff that I'm working on now, I've got a system where basically I take regular names and I like add a letter or I move a letter around, or it works out really kind of interestingly, and I'm fully hoping that it gets so big that people start just naming their kids some of the shit that I come up with, because some of them are really cool. So we'll see.
Makes me think of that skit with Peele, whatever his name is, Key and Peele. Yeah, and where he's like, what is it, Raquel instead of
yeah.
Like every time,
Hey, Aaron.
I love that.
That's a good one.
All right, Kimbra, how about you?
I think I started early on, and I still do this to some extent. I name my characters to help them, define who they are. And I pull on their characteristics and I try to name them on that. But just in general, sometimes when you're just writing a story and you need to stick in a character, I have a Pinterest board that, people go on to Pinterest and they pin recipes and all this stuff. Well, I pin like these lists with like baby names and things like that, that have like, your Celtic baby names, or your ancient goddess and god baby names, or baby names that mean evil, or witches, or like that kind of thing. And I save all those in one board, and then when I need to create a character, and I just pull up that board and I find which one of those kind of speaks to me for the character. And so a lot of the names and stuff that I do come from that Pinterest board, and I'm constantly adding lists to it. There's several different categories. There's a feminine, a masculine, names that can be used for both, and then like gender neutral names. And then I have some that are very specific, like witches names and things like that, because those are characters that I use more often. And so that's really where a lot of my names come from, because I started early on with Path of Redemption, and I started naming my characters so that the names would mean something, and that gets tiring very easily. and at some point you get kind of bogged down with trying to think of a name, and it's you thinking you need a good name, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean what you want it to mean. So that Pinterest board is like my gold mine.
Okay, that makes sense. And sounds like a really good way to keep it straight, too.
I need to wreck on something. In private chat, Cameron pointed out that it was actually Magnus in the books that made Lestat, and he's right. What's funny is I was like, wait a sec. Then I Googled who made Lestat a vampire, and the first result is Anne Rice. So not wrong. Not wrong.
Yeah.
And then it was in the stupid, horrible movie Queen of the Damned. It was Marius that did it, which is why I remembered it that way.
Yeah.
Even though I hated that movie.
I've got Brat Prince tattooed across here with Lestat's face right there. So like when I say like I'm a fan of that series, I've taken it to the level where like I can tell you a lot of things about Marius, like a lot, because he's got his own book and I've read it a couple times. So
Blood and Gold, right?
Yeah, Blood and Gold. It's good stuff.
I stopped reading around Memnoch after I finished that one. I don't know why. I just kind of lost interest.
You need to read the Mayfair Witches. I know we're
I heard good things.
In a different direction. Hunter and I will talk later.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm so bored that I don't know if I'm peeing right now.
Anyway, Shane, how do you?
Oh gosh.
Shane, of course, we got to ask how you come up with the names for your characters, also.
Yeah, so I don't really have like a tried and true tactic. So sometimes, like Kimbra hinted at, sometimes it's based on something. Sometimes I use the Necronomicon.
Necronomicon Nex Mortis.
And sometimes it'll be, what do they call that thing? This is going to show how ignorant I am. But what do they call the thing when they mix up letters? Anagram? And it means something else. Like you can mix up the letters and it means a different word entirely.
Yes.
Anagram, or is that
Lord Voldemort is Thomas?
Yeah, like that. Acronym, not acronym. I think it's anagram.
No, I think anagram.
Yeah, anagram.
Yeah. So sometimes I do that. Sometimes the names, like Alucard, is Dracula backwards. Sometimes, and I actually didn't do that because of Castlevania, ironically. I realized that after the fact. I was like, fuck, I think I copied that. But I love that character, but I just never made the connection when I came up with Alucard. But then sometimes it's like names are really important to me, but sometimes they just come to me because I know the character so well that I'll be looking at them kind of in my head or, my notes or whatever. And I'll say, Steve, no, definitely not Steve. John, no way. And like, you just kind of know when it fits. But when it comes to the main characters like Nate Temple, Soren Ambrosio, those are also business decisions in my attempt. Like Callie Penrose, I really wanted to come up with names that were powerful but simple, and they were easy to remember. And so Nate Temple, not too many syllables, Ambrosio, Soren Ambrosio, I thought Soren was a cool name that has some other meanings, but then Ambrosio was an homage to the first vampire. And so, but whenever I'm coming up with like a main character's name, it's got to be powerful. It's got to be easy to remember. And so there's a couple things that go on. I never just use like a name generator, or it always has to mean something. It kind of situational. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lane said he has a comment or question he wants to pop up real quick. Have you ever regretted making a character?
Not it.
All right, Kimbra, we'll start with you on this one.
Oh, don't start with me. I need to
Cameron, we'll start with you then.
Yeah, Quinn, it was just a huge mistake. I don't know why I ever agreed to do any of this. It's just crazy. No, honestly, I have no regrets. I can't imagine regretting making a character, mainly because like it would be second guessing a decision that like I think is completely necessary. It's such a hard. I'd be so confused. There's things I regret doing in writing, things that I wish, like scenes I wish I'd done better, or characters that I wish I'd given more credence to, or given more time on the page, or maybe even a little bit less. But like I've never regretted making any.
Hunter?
No, they're all pretty awesome.
Except Ulrich.
Right. Kimbra, you want to start now?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to give the answer that I'll regret later on. I have 2 cats in my series with my Phoenix, and they're 2 talking cats, and they're based on Katie Seagroves and Katie Kendrick in my reader group that does a lot of my admin stuff, and they've become really, really good friends of mine, and I decided to write them in the story. And now the point of contention is, are we ever going to get to be human? And my answer is always no. But I continually get asked the question of like, when do we get to be human? When do we actually get to experience human life? And I'm like, your cats. They're actually the children of the Cheshire Cat. So, your cats. Sorry. I don't regret it. I just said that just to rile them up. So, but yeah, the cats are sometimes I regret it when they get on me about being human.
All right, Shayne, now it's time for you.
No, I'd say no. Easy answer. I wouldn't have written them if that was the case. And it's you don't mess with genius, and so
Mr. Humble, everybody.
No, if there's a character that I later regret, like where he's going, I'll just kill him. So
a little harsh, don't you?
Or if readers really like them, I'll just kill them. I mean, I'll probably just kill a lot of them. So
yeah, and you've done that before.
Yes, love it.
No regrets.
Got a picture of young Cameron there.
Regrets. No regrets. That's actually not far off.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. What was your hardest scene to write, Kimbra?
Hardest scene to write. I mean, I have to go back to that spoiler alert in the 8th book in my Fairy Tale of the Trailer Park Queen. It's a character that I knew was very well loved. One of my best friends she's legit in love with him. And even though I had planned to do it very on, my husband and I discussed it for a very long time about how to kill him. And I knew that it had to be worth it, if that makes sense. The death needed to be not just because, I needed to get rid of the character. It needed to be a reason why they died. And it was very, very emotional to me. I've read that scene after I've written it and it was edited and everything. I've only read it once since then because I just, it was painful. I mean, even though I had for a very, very long time intended for it to happen and knew it was coming. And it's just like, it's not just like when you lose somebody, that's, terminally ill, but it's like from the beginning, I knew that his end was coming, and it just loomed over me and kind of the emotions built up in it. And yeah, it was a tough scene to write, and I wanted to make sure that I did him justice, and to it had to be very, very, in I don't even know how to explain how it is, but it was just emotional. It was racking, and it was probably the hardest scene I've ever written.
All right, Hunter.
There's a scene in book 3 in the dungeon. Not going to give away anything, but there was a character I didn't mean to do what I did. And what's funny is that I had a security camera when I was at my nutrition store, and I wish I'd saved the footage, but I went back and watched after I wrote it, because you can plan these things out, but for me, like what Kimbra is saying earlier, the characters go off and do their own thing. Like I'm surprised a lot of the times. So I did not mean for this person to suffer the way that they did. But what's funny is that I went back and watched the footage after I wrote it. I just did this. Like the camera was like facing down from like a corner. So it just shows me just go for like 5 minutes straight. I'm just like, what did I just do? But what's funny though is it was a missing puzzle piece I didn't know I needed, and it actually made the story work so much better. And people who have read it know what I'm talking about. But it's made the story so much better, and I'm happy I did it. But that one was kind of like I didn't mean to. I was just like, what did I just do?
Wait, let me do that. Go back. Cameron?
Ask it again. I just want to catch the wording one more time.
What was the hardest scene you've ever had to write?
That's a tough one because I don't.
Mother Lucker.
Working with Shayne. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. No, that's it though, right? Like I only really remember the fun ones. So like even the one I referenced before where like I was emotionally distraught, that scene came really easy. So it's not like a hard scene. If they mean like hard on me, then that's the case. But if you mean like difficult to write, most of the time, if I get there, like I had this happen to me recently. I was working on a new project, and I ran up against a thing where I was like, man, I'm just not feeling what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to go back and, and take a look at some of the other stuff and make some edits and stuff like that, and kind of see where my head goes. And I just, last night it popped into my head how I'm going to fix it. And so like, I didn't actually write the scene. I just waited until it was like appropriate for me to say like, okay, no, I'll go back, a good 1,000 words, delete what I've got and start with something different. That gets me right into a more exciting, more interesting scene for me to write, which in turn, I think often translates into a much more interesting read for the reader. So like, yeah, as far, like I said, if you're talking emotionally devastating for me, that's one thing. But as far as like technically difficult stuff, I try not to write it if I'm not enjoying it at least a little bit.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And Shayne, what about you?
Yeah, like the emotional scenes are always really easy for me to write. Like if I'm writing, 1,000 words an hour or something, as soon as I get to like a really emotional, punchy part or just really strong, good, bad, ugly, whatever part, I start writing like twice as fast. And so those days when I got like 30, 40,000 words, it's because there was a lot of big emotional or impacting scenes there. And so it's like you get a shot of adrenaline almost. Which is basically me saying I'm a sociopath. And so one thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because obviously if I get excitement out of writing these horrible scenes, or even just good scenes, romantic scenes or sweet scenes, or any scene with a kid, man, if there's a kid in danger or something, those scenes are like 3 times as fast for me. I'm just going and I'm shaking, and like, yeah, it's crazy. There were some scenes in Halo Breaker. I won't give a spoiler, but I can say the character's name, where you're seeing something from Solomon's point of view. That was really, really tough for me. Like I started seeing just kind of hazy, like your eyes kind of start watering, and it's not crying because men don't cry. But But it was just weird. Like I started getting like my face was hot, and you're blurry, and you're like, holy shit, this is a cool scene. And then there's been plenty of scenes like that in like Legend, and I think those are the coolest moments. And so if I ever get to a point where I'm writing a story and it feels kind of mechanical, where I'm like, okay, characters going here, characters going there, this is happening. If I start feeling too cookie cutter, I just hurt someone, and it solves the problem. And you hurt them or put them in a horrible situation that your character has to respond to. It can be a side character, it can be anything, it can be your main character. But you basically say, okay, well, it's how can I make their day worse? Or how can I let them touch their goal for a second and then trip and fall down the stairs, figuratively. And so whenever you do that, it kind of gives you that, like, okay, yeah, this I'm back in it now. And then I don't know. That's how I think about everything character first. So I'm always kind of thinking about it different than people, I think.
All right. Yeah. That I can agree with you on that one. What author do you most admire and why? Shayne, we'll start with you on this one.
That is a good one. What author do I most admire and why? That is tough.
I have one. If you want me to go ahead and go first,
you go. Yeah,
go ahead.
Brandon Sanderson. Fuck that dude. That guy writes such good shit so fast. I mean, like we write fast on a different level than he does, but like to go through the full traditional publishing process in the time frame that he does, putting out the word count books. I mean, you're talking. I mean, Words of Radiance or whatever the last one was that he did was like 1,200 words or 1,200 pages, something like that. They're massive. He's jumped around. He uses some cookie cutter elements, but like you talk about a guy who like when I put him up next to people I really like Patrick Rothfuss, like he always wins because he's just prolific. Like, and that for me is such an admirable trait for a writer. It's not just your ability to create good stuff. Like create good stuff, that's awesome. But if you can create good stuff consistently, often, that for me is the pinnacle.
All right, Kimbra.
An author that no, put your hand down. I see you.
That's my
At one point,
I forgot. We talked about this in the pre-meeting.
Maybe, and then I became enlightened and then understood that it was not the correct person to be idolized. I mean, it's really hard for me to answer that because I think the authors that I grew up with are the ones that really impacted me more than anything. But I don't know that I can say I admire them. I mean, there are authors that I enjoy more than others. There are authors that have influenced me more than others. But I don't know. I don't know that there's one that I can just say I absolutely admire them. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think if I want to go back and really say that there's an author that kind of made me a better reader, made me, and it was like my first adult books. I mean, I read a lot of stuff growing up, and you read Tolkien and you read Jane Austen and you read the things that you read in school, and then outside of that, things the ones that I really picked up and I latched onto that was not an assignment was Timothy Zahn's trilogy for Star Wars, the Thrawn trilogy, and those books really influenced me as a reader and how I enjoyed stories. I had never read a story where I liked the bad guy. And I don't really necessarily like Thrawn, but he's a very good bad guy.
He's very good.
And so I think, and then I've never met Zahn, so I don't know what kind of person he is, and I don't really look into their personal lives, so it's hard for me to say I really admire somebody. I admire their work, and their work has influence on me, so.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that one. Hunter, how about you?
I have three answers. The first, my favorite is Jim Butcher, just because Dresden got me into urban fantasy. So, you know, I'm biased on that one, just like I'm biased that the 1989 Batman is the best Batman movie ever made, simply because I'm biased towards it. I grew up watching it. Arguably, the Christopher Nolan movies could be construed as a much better filmmaking, but I still like the 1989 Batman. So Jim Butcher is my favorite. For writing style, I'd actually have to say J.K. Rowling, because after I finished book 8, I needed to let my brain rest. So I watched all the Lord of the Rings extended editions. I watched all the Harry Potters, and then as I was watching the Harry Potters, especially the later, I skipped the first 2, but as I was watching the later ones, especially with the Snape kills Dumbledore thing, you know, spoiler. You know, I was just thinking like, that is brilliant writing. Like that is some really subversive expectations right there, subverting expectations, and it was handled so perfectly. So that I really appreciated that. But for admire in general, and I almost hate to say it, but I'd have to say you, Mr. Silvers, and not to kiss your ass or anything, because I'm the talent.
Right there.
I'm glad he did it.
As an entrepreneur,
Cookie for you.
I've owned 3 businesses in the past. You know, I've worked my way up from nothing, especially my nutrition store. And so I can really appreciate the business side of things, and to see basically what Shayne has done is what I'm, what I would have done or I plan on doing kind of thing. Only, now that he's done it, I don't have to. So I have him and Shayne to do all the hard stuff for me. But I can appreciate him starting his own business, seeing where there's an opportunity and making the money that he's making. And also with the fan base, and he's just handling the business very appropriately, more so than almost anyone else out there that I've seen, which is one reason I had multiple offers on the table at the same time. Of course, you know, that's the toughest decisions are always, you know, there's always when it rains, it pours kind of thing, but in a good way, So the main reason I chose Argento was because Shayne and I had conversations, and I did my own research, saw the videos, listened to his business side, and him and I have very similar aspects and beliefs when it comes to being an entrepreneur. So it's a little, you know, kiss ass answer, but honestly, it's a real one though. You know, Shayne, what you have done is almost unprecedented. Actually, I would say it's unprecedented for the most part. There's not many out there who are building an empire like you have, and are fighting the big boys out there like Simon and Schuster and all those guys who are trying to survive where you're thriving. You know, we're coming up and taking their market.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. All joking aside, I appreciate that. And it's humbling. I appreciate that a lot. So for me to answer that question, I think it's hard for me to give an answer to one catch-all author that kind of, you know, embodies everything that I love, because I don't ever follow one person. I don't ever put every egg in one basket. So every author kind of has a different reason that I love them. And so if I'm going to try and capture it all together, I'd say Robert Jordan with Wheel of Time. Even if you don't like,
Wheel of Time, yeah.
Even if it's too dense and you're not really a fan, what he did is phenomenal, because he did it in a traditional publishing space, and he made such a big, vivid world. Plenty of people make big worlds. That's still complicated and impressive, but Jordan kept his characters more than two-dimensional cutouts. And so every city you went to, you knew what kind of food they served and what kind of clothes they wore and what the air smelled like and what the buildings looked like. And like, he was just so good at you being in the scene. And I just thought that was super impressive to juggle that much so quickly, really. I mean, each of his books were huge, and he never slowed down even until he died. And then Brandon Sanderson took it over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he nailed it. He nailed it. Like, I was blown away. I thought the Wheel of Time was ruined, because I love Brandon Sanderson, but I think Cameron probably loves him a lot more than I do. I think he's extremely talented, but it's just not my cup of tea every time. But when I saw what he did with Wheel of Time, he like tripled in value of what I originally thought of Brandon Sanderson. Because to pick up some things as complex as what Robert Jordan did, and then easily carry it past the finish line. He nailed it. And I just thought he did such an amazing job. So both of those men are phenomenal. But I would also say, different genre entirely, but Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, they write the Pendergast series. And that's thriller, but they always have a metaphysical aspect to it where you don't know if it's a logical explanation or a mystical explanation. And so they've got some really dark bad guys. It's kind of a whodunit. You never know what's going on. And it's just really thought-provoking and kind of ominous. And I just think they nail that really well. They have really good bad guys. And then as a kid, I would say Roald Dahl. I used to read Roald Dahl, I think every single book he had. That really got my imagination going in just the fantastical worlds that were possible. And so he kind of woke up my imagination, and then went to Homer and, every check mark you think of. But that's who I'd pick if I had to pick a couple.
Okay, that's a really good in-depth answer. I like that. What would you say is your most interesting writing quirk, Cameron?
I write on my phone. I write everything I write on my phone.
I cringe every time.
Everybody here is like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
I used to do that, but I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, I write on my phone. I love it. I've talked about why before, but I'll give a brief. The concept for me is that on my phone, it looks exactly like how it's going to look in Kindle. So for me, I do Google Docs. I don't do Word. So I'm able to see exactly what, like, spacing and stuff like that, like the paragraphs, the sizes, when's a good break for a lot of these things. It makes it look like it's not a draft, which motivates me to make it better than a first draft would be if I were to sit and do it on the computer. And I can now do it pretty fast. I can still write faster on the computer, but I don't really tend to just pump out sentences that way anyway. I tend to construct as I go. So writing on the phone is my writing quirk that alienates a lot of people. I can't do, there's other things I can't do though that other people do, like listen to music like Hunter does. That shit would drive me nuts. So, everybody's a little different, but I think I'm super different. So.
All right, Hunter, how would you answer that one?
What was the question again?
What would you say is your most interesting writing quirk?
Ropes.
Actually, yeah. I'm always in a rope. Like, I have a fan at my feet though. Year round, my house is like 69 degrees at night. All right. And I don't care that's 100 outside here in Texas. Like, I think I have it on 72 during the day. But I like to keep it cold. But even in the dead of winter, I'll have a blanket on me and a fan. Like, I always just have fans on me. I like to, I don't know, be cool, but also be, I don't know. So I guess that's a writing quirk. But I also have my 3 screens here. I have Scrivener over here, Word here on my big 32-inch curved, and then my super old monitor. I have YouTube playing the music and stuff. So really, I could do like 10 things at once. I suppose is my quirk. I could take a second when I'm trying to think of something, go to this screen, work on adding some merchandise like the Bearded Beanie logo, available at hunterblain.com. And then go back over here to Scrivener and be like, oh, yeah, I want to do this later for hunterblain.com. Don't forget that. Go back to Scrivener and make a note for later on in the series. So it drives my wife crazy that I can do like 10 things at once. And she's like you, Cameron. We actually built her a she shed, they call it, outside. It's really nice. It's really nice.
Sorry, that was good. That was funny.
She calls me a box of noise.
Oh, yeah.
So, she doesn't do music or anything like I do. So I guess I'm weird that I multitask all the time. So at any given time, I could pause what I'm doing, go feed the dogs, or make a phone call, then immediately pick back up where I left off.
Can't do that. I can't. I'm bad at that.
Kimbra?
The reason why I muted myself, I asked my husband, I was like, I don't know what my writing quirks are. I don't know. My writing situation is normally in my recliner with my MacBook and my dog and a Diet Sunkist. And There are variations on that theme. Sometimes there's no dog. Sometimes there's bourbon instead of Diet Sunkist. I like to be comfortable. After I had multiple surgeries in 2020, and I took to sitting in the recliner as opposed to sitting in my office chair, just because the surgeries made it difficult for me to sit up in that position, and it's just kind of stuck. And so that's where I write. I write in my recliner, which is probably not good because I can fall asleep. I have this superpower where I can fall asleep anywhere, anytime. My husband says it's amazing, because I don't even have to lay down. And then I used to even do it when I worked in a car factory. Some of you know I worked in automotive manufacturing, and we'd have these stations that we'd work at. And there was one particular one where you had to turn a door every certain amount of time and check something and then turn the door again. And it happened like every 76 seconds. And it's bad that I remember the takt time on that. But during the time that I got done, I could walk over and hold onto the handle of the door and sleep standing up. And then when the robot on the other side of the fence set the part down into the fixture, it would rattle. So it would wake me up, and then I could turn it back around. And so, sitting down is probably not the best thing for me, but that's where I write, is in my recliner. I can sit up and write. I used to write on my phone because I was at work so much. And a lot of times if I thought of something, or if I was in the middle of a scene or whatever and just didn't want to stop it, I'd duck into a corner and risk getting fired because I'm on my phone typing out a scene. I didn't do that too much, but I did do it. But, for the most part, it's just as relaxed as possible. And somebody said I wasn't paying attention. I just want you to know I've got my phone and I'm like watching the different versions of this and people commenting. So I am paying attention, I promise.
Scrolling Pinterest and texting.
No.
All right, and now we got to know, Shayne, what's your writing quirks?
I can't be in a nice place. I found this out. Like I'm in a nice home right now, like a typical office space. I can't do it. Like I can't. It's too orderly for me. And I've been thinking about it. Like, is it me, or what is it? Why can't I write here? It's got to be chaotic, and it's got to be kind of run down. It's kind of weird. I need like a crack house to write good books. I don't really know why, but as I've been thinking about it more, when I started my writing career, I was working full time, going to school, doing all this stuff. And I could only do it at crazy hours, at crazy locations. And so I would get up at like 4, and I would take my laptop to, it's not even a park, it's just a picnic table that's by a lake and a power plant. And I would be outside at 4 a.m. writing there before I had to go to school or work, because I would hypothetically, allegedly, tell people at work that I had like a meeting or something in the morning. And so I couldn't go to a coffee shop where someone might see me. And so I always had to find these like shady places to work. And it just kind of became habit. And so, I'd write on the back porch, or I'd write at that picnic table. I'd go to lunch at work, and I would go to that picnic table. And anytime a car drove by, I'm like, shit, is it someone I know? Is it someone from work or whatever? And so it kind of just became a habit. So like the office environment doesn't really work for me. So that's kind of why I was looking at that little shed. It's why I've been looking at like an old warehouse. If I can find like an old small mechanic's garage, I'd probably buy it. I don't know. It's just cool. Like the old kind of lofty, like a New York loft where it's like exposed brick and pipes. That just really works for me. I don't know why, but aesthetically.
Okay. Well, that actually explains a lot.
I'm broken inside.
That explains an awful lot right there. Okay. How would you describe your ideal reader? Beyond the ones who buy your books, obviously. Hunter, we'll start with you. We haven't started with you for a while. What would you say?
Who's my ideal reader?
How would you describe your ideal reader?
Awesome.
So it's an easy question.
Anyone who buys my book or does the Kindle Unlimited or Audible, you're awesome.
Anyone who,
HunterBlain.com.
buys, anyone who buys all of those is what you meant, right?
Yeah.
Every version of it.
Oh, and readers who leave reviews on both the Goodreads
Yes.
and the Amazon.
Yes.
I like reading the reviews too. It's just you enjoy having them. Cameron, what would you say?
They like long walks on the beach and champagne before noon. I will say my favorite kind of reader, and this is most of the vast majority that I've met, if not all the ones that I've met, are people who keep an open mind. Because more often than not, I'm going to say something or put something in there that's going to challenge your worldview, or you like it may just be wrong, but like you still have to interact with it, right? So the best readers out there are ones who can keep an open mind when they come into contact with something unfamiliar or strange. People who can suspend disbelief, people who are incredibly fond of like nonfiction. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but an ideal reader for me is somebody who you're just going to roll right with the next thing, right? Like you're on board for the ride, and you're not going to get freaked out if the ride goes off the rails, So.
Kimbra?
Yeah, I think Cameron's right with the open mind, because, and maybe even just someone that has a mind where they're able to immerse themselves in the story and not let their personal hangups get on it. Because, I understand that when people read a story and they come across a typo or something like that, it kicks them out of the story. But for me, it doesn't. I just keep on. And I think part of that is I'm willing to give my entire attention, my entire brain over to that author for the time being that I'm reading their words. And I think for me personally, as a reader, I feel like I'm giving the author the respect of, hey, this person's human and I'm going to read their story no matter what. And then, like I said, I like people who are willing to roll with the punches. Because I like to deal out punches. Shayne does that, and we all kind of roll with it. And, but, overall, a reader that's just immersed in the story. Those are the ones that I'm like, don't read just to, I don't know, critique everything that goes on. Read to be enjoyed. Enjoy it. Entertainment. That's the entertaining reader is the one that I like the best.
And Mr. Silvers, what about you?
I would say I like misfits, but more than the misfits, I like rich people. So both would be good. But no, I like people who don't take themselves too seriously. Like everyone was kind of saying that there's a lot of readers that read it kind of academically, and they're waiting to catch the red line moment. And I don't care for those people in real life. Not with editing and ARC team and stuff. Obviously, that's what I'm asking them to do. But just as a general rule, I'm looking for people who want to laugh, and they've been waiting to laugh all day, but they're not allowed to say certain things at work, or they're not allowed to say certain things in certain company. And they're always kind of holding themselves restrained. And then I get to give them a book where they can just let loose and just have fun and take the censorship off and just cut loose. And I think that's fun. I think that's kind of the point, is you're the pressure release valve for their day. And so that's what I try to be. And so anyone who takes themselves too seriously and they're looking for that moment to cancel you or to catch you or whatever, or just complain about something, I don't care about those people in normal life. So I definitely don't care about them in readership life, I guess. But
that makes sense.
They should still buy my book, though.
If they don't like it, you can always highlight a section and make a comment or whatever. We see those, so
and then I'll fix it, and they should buy a second copy to make sure I fixed it.
Yeah,
and then we'll just keep doing that
until
we realize that I'm not fixing anything. See how many copies we can get them to buy.
Duly noted and ignored.
Kimbra fell over.
How do you come up with the titles to your books, Shayne?
marketing and buzzwords a lot of times. At least that's a heavy factor. So I'm always looking for really memorable. I kind of mentioned this with names too. Looking for really memorable or easy recitable or emotional triggering titles. So like Savage, Dark Horse, Legend, like something that really resonates and you kind of hear yourself echo it when you read it. So you see so-and-so's got a book and it's not a slow regard of silent things. Like to me, that was too much of a mouthful and it's hard to remember, even though I just remembered it. But it just didn't really do anything for me. And so like I always try to find titles that, one, they match the story, but two, it gives you a sense of what the book's about, whether it's psychologically, emotionally, tone, whatever. And you're like, oh, that sounds cool. I have no idea what it's about. That sounds cool. And you're going to remember what it's called. And so I'm always trying to think of things like that. And Cameron and I always have a blast because we have to look at list of drinks and say, okay, does that work? There's like, we got a whole alcoholic list of like all the things that we could title Phantom Queen Diaries. And we're like, oh, that one's perfect for book 12, or, yeah, that one's got absinthe in it, or that one's got scotch. We need scotch. It's just really fun to kind of think of, okay, does it match the tone? Is it a cool sounding drink? And it's one of the funnest parts, but it's also got to be words that will hit the algorithms, unfortunately, hit the marketing terms, search terms. You got to find something that will get noticed in case all of your other marketing efforts fail. And so there's a lot to go into it. So
I just saw some pop up here. I guess we can add it with the current question of, do you do come up with the titles first or last?
It depends how far I go into the story. There's sometimes with Callie, for example, I had a bunch of her titles kind of in a row already. And we'll talk a little bit about this with Gene and Sasha. And Cameron can probably touch on it when it's his turn. But sometimes the cover kind of directs where the story is going to go. I tell the cover designer, okay, it's going to have this kind of general concept. It's going to be really dark or really gritty, or I need Callie to look furious or violent, or whatever it is, or sad. And then I'm like, oh, I've got a list of titles that matches perfectly with that cover, and so now I'm going to be changing my story to match it. But sometimes I'll get halfway through a book before a title just hits me, and I'm like, ooh, yes, that's perfect, and I'll change it. I've changed titles before, so.
All right, Cameron.
Yeah, with the Quinn books, the title's always first. I pick the drink, and it's kind of fun because actually the drinks have informed the books more than anything else in a lot of ways. It's weird that that's the case, right? Like building it the way we did, I didn't anticipate that would be the way it would go. But like for each of the books, I've got a massive document on my phone of just drinks. With like stars next to ones that I think are more viable than others. I try to stick with drinks that like people have actually heard of or like have had. I think Brimstone Kiss was the first time we've actually really deviated, and that was mainly because we really wanted Brimstone to be a title. But for the most part, they inform them. There's ones like Snake Bite that I'm thinking like, all right, it would be pretty cool to work in. I think you say your manga something like that.
Yeah.
Jormungandr. There we go. And like there you go. Like you have the two things in tandem. So there's lots of options for things like that. But I always go with the title first because I find it's way easier than to incorporate whatever major theme that deals with that drink. I don't think you can do it in reverse because it'd be way too hard to try and figure out. Because with Shayne's, he can pick any title he wants, right? Like you want it to be buzzy and you want it to be like something that rolls off the tongue well, but you can't like free-range drinks, right? Things that exist already. I'm basically picking from a set amount of things. So I have to go with title first. And then with Cinders and Salt, those were very similar. Shayne and I discussed the title, like the buzzword concept and like working with certain things, parameters for things that like would interest people and get them motivated to buy the book. And then with the new stuff, well, there's a whole other logic to the titling system there, but yeah, I think it all kind of comes down to wanting to have it match as much as possible with what people are about to pick up. Because I think if you give them something, you name it something that doesn't have anything to do with it, it's going to be really confusing to people.
True. Kimbra?
I didn't kill over there. My laptop was dying. I had to plug it up.
That's why I was trying to give you some more time. I saw you posted that your husband was going to get your plug-in, so I was trying to give you a little bit of time before we asked you anything.
Sorry, my bad, guys.
It's okay.
I don't know why it was dying. It must not have plugged up last night. But anyway, my titles always become before the books. And that becomes most of the time when I'm brainstorming the series itself and what steps each book is going to take. For Fairy Tales of Trailer Park Queen, which every one of those books is based on a Southern saying, I had, like Cameron, I had an enormous list of Southern sayings, and some of them are very long, and so those immediately get kicked out. And even some of the ones that I like, Hotter Than Blue Blazes, is a little longer than I would like to have, and it's difficult, especially from a cover designer perspective, to put a long title on a book. I've learned that as I've done some cover design. So I just went through and picked the ones I knew how I wanted the story to go, and I picked the ones that I thought would match the story. And then as I wrote the story, I wrote them to fit. It's funny, when I started picking names for Alchemist Air, we had a shared document with Shayne and Lane, and I had brainstormed some words that I wanted to use, and then Shayne came in and put some other stuff, and I looked at it and thought, oh my God, what the hell is this? And then she talked about it.
Crazy.
I was like, are we wanting to go the kitschy route? Is this going to be kitschy? But then when he said he does it for buzzwords and marketing, and that's really where he was kind of pointing me that direction. And I still picked the ones I wanted. But yeah, so I had a list of like words that were related to alchemy and bourbon distilling. And then of course, as they go along, they get more alchemist than bourbon distiller. And I think that has to do with the character. He embraces that alchemist side of him a lot more than just, hey, I know my bourbon business. So yeah, I think, my titles always come before my books. For example, the Stories of Frost and Fire, which is my Phoenix series, I bought those covers and named those books in the fall of 2018. And I didn't release the first of those books until the fall of 2019. And so I sat on those covers for almost a year, but I had already picked out all the names for them. In that case, it's, first flame and, second sight. And so each one of mine definitely has a theme to them. The Dog River Wolf Pack is all Southern rock songs. The Vampires is variations on rap songs, but I just stick in the word vamp instead of whatever's in the rap song. So, it's each one I try to keep mine thematic as I go, and each one has a theme to it, so that it builds a cohesive, marketable, storyline. And I do think about marketing. I think maybe I just approach it a little differently than Shayne does, but I think, especially that first book. And I know for a long time I debated on what to call Bless Your Heart. For a very long time, I wanted to call it Amazing Grace. And Amazing Grace ended up being the last book. But I discussed it a lot with Larry Tushman and Mike Arthur about that title. And it just, after talking it out with them, is very clear that it needed to be Bless Your Heart, because that's such a quintessential phrase of the South. Yeah. And so that really immediately defined my brand and what I was trying to do, and continues to do so to this day. So I think a lot of it has to be what fits your story. But then again, Shayne's right. It needs to be very marketable and very, it has to define what you're doing.
Yeah. It's got to be both. Yeah. Like you said, it can't just be marketing either. Yeah. Because a lot of times I'll just free write those buzzwords, and they're all corny and trashy. That's the point of buzzwords. And so you kind of have to say, like I do something with Cameron too, is where I word cloud, and I'll just come up with the craziest shit. And it's a list of 2 pages of just random stuff, but it's so that you see the word bourbon and you're like, ooh, how can we play with the word bourbon? And that leads you to something else. And so that's kind of why I do it. I just vomit on the page, and then we go from there, see what happens. So.
Yeah, because I think at one time I was trying to make the names match certain brands of bourbon, but change it a little bit.
Yeah.
And the longer I played with those, it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the things that I have, and it relates directly to the bourbon alchemy and kind of mashing that together.
Yeah. No, you nailed it.
Okay. That makes that, I can understand that. And Hunter, how do you answer that one?
I always know what the book title is going to be. It's random. Like I'm Glad You're Dead, for example, is a quote from the 1989 Batman that John and I used to say all the time, like in Jack Nicholson's voice. For, it was basically a comment to say for anything. It was a response for almost anything, So we would just say it all the time. So it only felt appropriate that the first book be titled that. And then Those Wonderful Toys is also from the Batman movie, which
I remember that one.
Yeah. And then like Holy She-Holy and What the Hell, those were just fun. Like What the Hell, I laughed whenever I came up with that name because that's just something John would say. If it might not be hell he would say, but just because the premise of part of the story being in hell kind of thing, so it made sense. And then like Moonlight Equilibrium and Crack the Sky are song titles that I really like from two different bands. So I always know what the title is going to be before I start the book, but it also, it's short, it's sweet, and it ties heavily into what the story is going to be about. Like Dawn and Quartered, I really like that one. Instead of Drawn and Quartered, it's Dawn and Quartered because he's a vampire. But he's given choices and stuff that no matter, he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't. So I actually really like that title because of the choices he has to make. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I always know what the title is going to be first. And it's usually, it just comes to me. I don't put ever much thought of that. Someone just asked about Mouth of Madness. Well, we know which character that's in reference about. And of course, that is an homage to Into the Mouth of Madness. That's a great story, and I love the movie too with Sam Neill.
Oh yeah.
So that one was, it's short, it's short and sweet. It fits for what the character is going through, and the mouth part too. I don't want to give away too much, and then it's also an homage. So I guess a lot of my books are those three things.
I thought it was an acronym. I thought it was a play on the acronym for mom.
Good night, everybody.
I'm probably being texted and yelled at right now.
Okay. Next question up is: tell us about the process for coming up with the cover concepts and art. Hunter.
So much to Lane's dismay, I don't come up with the cover until when the story's done, at least the first draft. And it could take several weeks for them to actually come out and do the final drafts of the books. But all my covers mean something. Like it ties very heavily into the story. It's not just some books are here it is, that kind of thing. Like Those Wonderful Toys, like that one's my favorite cover, and then Crack the Sky is probably my second favorite cover. They're really close neck and neck. But if you look at the cover of Those Wonderful Toys and then you've read the story, it makes sense, that scene. And same thing with Crack the Sky, and I don't know, I just love it all. But now the first books 1 through 5, I had the original covers I had commissioned myself back in the day, and then we got on board with Argento, and then we redid them because the original covers actually had John's face, but him and I were not very picture-y. We didn't take a lot of pictures at all. So I only had a handful, and they were old, so they were not grainy, but they were kind of blurry, and it was, and his face was the same in most of the covers. So then we worked with Deranged Doctor, and we redid all those covers, and they look very similar to what the original covers were, almost precisely what the original covers were. So that was easy. And then book 6 was the first one where that was the first one with Deranged Doctor. And there's a lot of back and forth on that one. No, not this. It needs to be this. No, not that. It needs to be this. And then I think by the time they did all my covers and they got the feel, whenever book 7 came out, whenever Lane sent me the file for book 7, I was just like, holy shit, that's it. And it's the same thing with Crack the Sky. So now we're on a really simpatico path of they know my style and what I'm looking for. And like Those Wonderful Toys was, except for I had him change one thing because he's looking up. So his beard, you could tell, was trimmed here and bushy here. So all we had to do was fill that in, and that was it. That was the only thing they had to change. And then on Crack the Sky, I don't think there was a single thing we changed. Yeah, on that one, Shayne and I talked, and Lane, about different ideas. Like John is holding a black hole, for example, and that's a real picture of a black hole. That's what it's theorized to look like. So that is freaking awesome. And then even the crack in the background, the Crack the Sky part, it was all intentional, and they got it the first time. So I'm so happy with how things are going, and each cover coming out is like my favorite. So it's very, very lucky.
Just to clarify on Hunter, he said it's very easy. It is not, because Hunter does not give a very simple explanation. He gives you a movie score with like film and music, and it's like a panned picture he gives a very detailed visual, and it's awesome, but it's very hard to translate into a still image. And I do the same thing. So that's why I'm laughing about it. Because he will give you basically a trailer, like a movie trailer of what he wants the cover to be. And there's all these awesome elements. And so then we have to get on the phone and kind of pick and choose, okay, what did you mean by this? That's really cool, but we can't have all that in a still picture. So how do we prioritize this and still get the theme? And it's a really cool conversation, but it's not easy.
Well, it's easy for me. You're the one who has to deal with Deranged Doctor and all of those guys. I think it's for Crack the Sky, I did give you like a whole list of things, and then you came back and said, "How about this?" And I was like, "Okay." And then it actually worked out perfect anyway. So
no, it's amazing. I'm laughing because I do the same thing in my head. I have to kind of reprioritize what I mean when I'm talking to Lane or Gene and Sasha and whoever. So I know I do the same thing. That's why I think it's funny. But sorry, I wasn't trying to jump in there.
That's okay. I was going to ask you next. How would you answer that one?
So we're going to kind of go into a lot of depth with this with Gene and Sasha, but I'll answer it here, just not too much in depth. If you want to hear a really detailed talk on the covers, we'll be going with Gene. But what was the question again specifically?
What's the process for coming up with the art for the concept for the covers and the artwork for it?
So
It's mine.
Okay, I was like,
There's a train. I was
like, I got censored already.
No.
So with me, it's kind of like Hunter. Like I just said, I come up with this kind of visual image of a tone or a theme, and with mine, it's hard because we do model shoots way in advance, and so we kind of have to have all these crazy poses and ideas with our models holding a sword or whatever it is. And then we have to adapt that. So mine's always kind of like Hunter. It's like a movie poster is how I'm always thinking it. Whenever you see a cool movie poster and you're just like, oh my God, I have no idea what that is, but it looks amazing. What is this about? I want my cover to make you ask yourself a question where you're like, I need to know more. Like, what is this? That's my whole point of the cover. And so, but it has to match the tone and everything. So I'm very much like Hunter, where I kind of have like this highlight reel playing in my head, and I got to try and pin down, okay, the sky needs to be dark. The sky needs to be ominous, or it's got to have a really bright moon. There's got to be an angel on fire falling, like whatever it is, there's got to be some kind of element that makes the viewer say, what the fuck is this? And that's always kind of my point, is to make it very cinematic.
Okay, yeah, man. Kimbra, how would you answer that one?
Okay, first of all, let me just say that I'm a cover whore. I love covers, and I have covers for series that will last me for 5 years. Seriously. Just because when I find a piece of art, it is inspiring and my brain goes into squirrel mode, and I chase that. And I have so many different series lined out, and most of them have covers. I think when I'm doing something specific, though, I've learned that if you trust your artist, the best thing you can do is just give them a general concept and allow them to run with it, because they are creative minds just like you. And sometimes what they come up with is better than what you had in mind. And you have to give them that leeway. And so I've found there's one particular artist that is doing most of my covers for the new pen name that I'm launching. And basically, I give him the photo of the character and give him a color tone that I want for it and let him run. And he knocks it out of the park every single time. And you can't do that with every artist, but it's been very easy with Jean, who did the covers for Alchemist Air. I just gave them a very basic concept of what was, I think the first one was the hardest one to get right. And then once we got that tone and that feel, the other ones have been much easier. The last two that they've sent me, I think there was a minor change on both of them. And so it wasn't a big, huge revamp of any of that. So I've learned through purchasing all these covers that I really don't need. But I will use them. I'm determined. But
they'll get used, I swear.
I've learned that sometimes, I have to defer to their art. It's very important to give them the creative space, and a lot of times they come back with something that surprises you. Now, I made the mistake in the beginning when I did my Abomination cover and Intuition cover were still very UF, but when I went and I did the first covers for Fairy Tales of a Trailer Park Queen, I pretty much dictated what I wanted those to look like, and I still absolutely love those original covers. They're on my background on my computer, but they're no longer the covers for that series, because I had to learn that they tended more toward more toward the romance genre as opposed to urban fantasy, and you really have to. It's really a marketing game when it comes to covers, and you have to make sure that what you put out there. I'd love to do something different. Cameron's covers with the Cinders and Salt and having the object-based covers. I love covers like that. I design covers like that. They're invoking to me. They're the ones that I've drawn to on the shelves in the bookstore. But when they're on Amazon and they're in Kindle Unlimited and they're independent, there's a certain expectation for readers, and you have to meet that expectation. They'll tell you they want something different, but then they'll turn around and buy the same similar cover over and over again. And so a lot of it's, you fight yourself of doing what you want, and then, turning around and making sure you have something marketable in the end. And I could talk about covers all day long just because I like art and I like that whole facet of the business. Someone asked in the chat about this character behind me.
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself.
That's Winnie. That's my Phoenix. This was done by Mona Fendon. She's an artist, and she's done stuff for Nasri Noir. She's done stuff for Orlando Sanchez. And when I saw them, I knew that I had to get her to do Winnie. And when she did, I was just blown away. It wasn't exactly what I would have expected, but I love it. So yeah, overall I love art, and I think that really helps me when I do books, because I try to get that visualization, but we have to hit that marketing note too.
All right, and Cameron.
So I'm not going to get into any depth really with the Phantom Queen stuff, because Shayne hit a lot of that, and you guys will be talking to Gene and Sasha, and they're fantastic, and so that'll be a lot of fun for all of you guys to hear their process. And I will say though that I was pretty much trained by Shayne early on as to what what the process was, like as far as like what I needed to get together to send to them so that they could get a starting point. And then it was out of my hands, and it would all go through Shayne for the most part up until like certain points. Then he'd send me like 3 or 4 different renditions to check out. Cinders and Salt completely different. What
you always came up with the theme though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But like, again, because I knew the title right away, it was often really easy to do that. Like, you know, Moscow Mule was really simple. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, cool. Like ice, snow, cold, right? Like we had the woman who does the modeling for us for Quinn do the Moscow hat, the big furry thing way in advance.
You have to go to the photo shoot.
Yeah, exactly. Like years, like I would say like 2 years before, or at least a year before.
A year before, I think. Yeah.
Probably a year before. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so we had a lot of those things up and running and ready to go. That made for making it quite easy to transition. I would just take an image and then transition it over. But you guys will get into all that. They're, like I said, they're a really fun group. But as far as the Cinders and Salt, I did that with my brother-in-law, and moving forward with all the new stuff. I mean, I expect it'll be the same kind of deal where my new process is more that I actually build the cover myself on Photoshop, and then because like I can now do with my phone. I mean, it's been like 2 or 3 years since I started, but like I can now do with my phone with the apps and stuff like that, crazy stuff, to be able to build something that I can send, and then they can make it look good. You know what I mean? Like, I'll do something that makes it like, this is kind of my idea, and then you guys run with it and make it look really interesting. And then after that, I just leave it all with Lane and Shayne to fix. That's my process.
Give us a mess.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I've seen it, all right? Like, I'll see the email chains occasionally. They'll reach out and say, like, hey, you know, here's the thing. But, like, they'll send it as a forward. And so what's funny is, like, going back and seeing, like, the blockchain email of just, like, all the different things that had to, like, get fixed before I got to the point where I got to say, like, oh, yeah, like, I think it needs to be a little lighter. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like maybe a little more blue over here, you know, something like that. But no, it's a fun experience.
And there's a lot of times where the email chain, like the designer will be like, hey, Shayne, what does Cameron think of this? I'm like, oh, he'll love it. Don't worry about what Cameron thinks.
Yeah. Will it sell? Cameron will love it. Is it going to sell? Yeah, then he'll shut the hell up and he'll
be fine with the sales. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So shut his cake on and take what we give him.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So.
All right. We'll try to do one more because I know we're getting kind of close to time. We'll go with, have you ever traveled to settings in your books to learn about them or get a feel for them? Anybody want to take that one?
I have not yet, but I would love to. I'm about to go to Scotland, so that's gonna definitely take that. The one instance, most of the time it's not. I do a lot of research. I did a lot of research for Moscow Mule and would really like to go there at some point. But kind of independently of like you know, the world. Like if everybody was just not there, I would really enjoy that trip. You know what I mean? Like no humans, just me and like the architecture and the cool stuff that's there. Because like humans ruin everything. But like my hope is to get to some of those. In Cinders and Salt, I wrote about this place that really exists, and it's basically like a fantasy world all by itself. It's called Cappadocia. I guess you can say it different ways, Cappadocia. But it's in Turkey, and it is unreal. Like if you were to look it up, it's like they have these things called fairy chimneys. It's like basically land masses that have been built up. It looks like a cavernous kind of just crazy otherworldly place. And they like fly air balloons there, and you know it's great. Like I want to go really bad, but no, for the most part, I haven't been able to go to many of the places that I've tried to write about and am writing about.
Salem,
I didn't get to go to. So like I went up to go to the Boston trip, and what I found out, because I booked it kind of late because I was trying to get there for the whole big deal that they do around Halloween, and it turns out that like unless you book that about a year in advance, you are SOL. Like you won't stay. Like there you go, Kimbra. I like it.
Now I'm that.
Yeah. I know Boston.
Now we all have beards.
There it is.
Yeah.
Now we all have beards.
I like it.
I'll go. I used to be.
Go ahead, John. Hunter.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Nice.
I used to be a district manager for Sears for a number of years, and even though I live in DFW, I had like the Houston market. So I would 3 out of every 4 weeks I was in Houston for a long time. So it was easy to base my books in Houston. I know most of that area pretty well. So yeah, yes, I have been there.
Kimbra.
Well, I mean, I pretty much live in a small town in Alabama, so that's can't really visit my place. But there are places I tend to write about places that I already know and I've been to. I have a series that's in Nashville. I've been to Nashville a billion times. I have a series that's in Georgia. I've been to Atlanta and in Georgia, and actually my previous husband was from Georgia, so I spent a lot of time in Georgia. I know that. Steel Shore is based on Mobile, Alabama. I have relatives there. My mother grew up there. I'm very familiar with that area. Dog River is in that area too. So I tend to write about places that I've already been. Now, Oddities Emporium takes place in Charleston, and I have another series coming up that will take place in Savannah. So that's going to be a kind of a 3-day trip for me coming up soon, probably next spring or next summer. And I'm just going to hit both of them and make sure I spend a little time in those cities. There's other places that I've written about. Boulder, Colorado is one of them. I'd like to go there one day. But I just do really extensive research. I pull up the Google map and look at it from an overhead view. I try to get a feel for the cities that I haven't been to, but I try to stick to places that I've already been. Now, fantasy places like, for instance, winter or summer, the other world for me, those are just imaginary places. So I would love to visit them, but they exist in my brain, and I live there enough.
And Shayne?
Yeah, so for legal reasons, I try not to describe the places that are in my books too much because they're probably going to get destroyed. But I'll base real places, or I'll base scenes for my books on real places. So, for example, there was a rooftop bar in St. Louis that Cameron told me about. And so I talked to him about it, and I said, here's what I want. I want some kind of open air bar. And he said, there's a place just like that here. It's in Soulard, right? I think
it was actually in the Loop.
The Loop, yeah.
Moonrise Bar.
Yep. And so I was like, okay, that's good, because if I describe the one open rooftop bar in Soulard and I name it something else, everyone's gonna be like, oh, he's talking about this place. And then I just didn't want to destroy their place of business in my book. So I'll always talk about places that I've been, but I've never been the author that tries to get the scenes so accurate that it's almost boring. Just to me as a reader, I never liked that. I liked kind of hearing the high points, like, okay, the Sprint Center's right there, and the Plaza's right here, and the Plaza has this kind of atmosphere, and there's these kind of buildings, and that's it. And like, it's got a fountain, it's got this. So I give you the tone and the feel, but I want your mind to make it your own. I do the same thing with characters too. I never try to 100% describe what the character looks like. I give you a really basic idea, and then I let you kind of finish making the character, so that as the story goes, you've helped create Nate with me. And so now Nate is just as much yours as it is mine. So when something bad or good happens to him, you feel like you're part of it. And so it's kind of I don't know about psychological trick, but it's kind of it brings them closer in the story. So I do the same thing with scenes. I try to just let you fill in a lot of it. But I think it's amazing when people can go into extreme detail on settings and stuff. I can't do that very well. And so I cheat.
Okay, well, I know Lane was wanting to say he wanted to cut this off at about 12:15, and we're getting kind of close to that. I don't think we have enough time for another question. There were a few more. Some were from history, some were just for fun. Unfortunately, couldn't get to those right now. But I hope this has been entertaining. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed spending this time with you guys. I hope y'all had fun, and I hope all the people watching at home had fun also. Once again, you guys are great. We love your books. We love y'all's work. Please keep it up. Please don't stop. And, well, I hope we enjoy the rest of the weekend, y'all.
Yeah, and real quick, if anyone here over the next couple days, next week, just click through the comments here. And if you see a question that's kind of directed towards you or one you want to answer that we couldn't get to, I know the readers would love it if you just posted a comment or whatever in your spare time, especially if they're asking about your books or something, or just a question that you feel you can answer really well that we couldn't get to today. I know they'd love it. So if you guys can do that, I know I'll be doing it. So. And
for those of you who are my fans, which you're awesome, Luke Daniels and I, and I think Shayne, I think you're going to be there too, right? Yeah. So from 12:30 to 1:15, we're going to be talking with Luke, and he's also going to be doing a live reading of from the new book. Not really a spoilery section. I made sure it was more funny than anything, and so look for Lane to post a link for that coming up in shortly.
Yeah, 20-something minutes. I'm just there to be serenaded and take a nap by the sweet sound of Luke's voice. So he's got a killer
Sounds
voice.
like a country singer, Luke Daniels.
Yeah. Just sounds dreamy. So.
All right. Well, like I said, it was my pleasure to host this event. It was good seeing you guys again. So I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the weekend.
All right. See you guys in like 25. Thanks.